Okay, hey everyone. Thanks for joining our panel discussion today all around building a B2B brand the modern way. My name is Jason Widup, and I'll be trying to moderate this unruly panel today. In my day job, I'm a B2B marketing advisor and consultant until recently, worked for Gil as VP of Marketing at Metadata. Before we kick it off, I'd like to invite my friends Gil and Dave to introduce themselves. Dave, why don't you kick us off?
My name is Dave Gerhardt. I am a former startup CMO. I was CMO at a company called Privy, and before that, I was Chief Brand Officer and VP of Marketing at a company called Drift. Now I run my own business, which is a B2B media company called Exit 5. We have the leading community for B2B marketers, one of the top podcasts for B2B marketers in the space, and I've been doing stuff in this sphere for about a decade, and I know you both well, and I'm excited to chat marketing with you.
Sweet. All right, Gil, take it
Awesome. My name is
away.
Gil Allouche. I'm a software engineer turned marketer turned entrepreneur. I'm excited about robotics and about B2B marketing, and I combine those two passions of mine to start Metadata. And I also am very happy to have this discussion with both of you. It's been a while since we three of us chatted, so excited for this.
Yeah, we always have great discussions, and now everyone can just get in on it as we're talking through it. So yeah, so today we're talking about building a B2B brand, and there's a lot that goes into it. And it's kind of one of those things where we start with the word brand, and everyone seems to have like a slightly different idea of what it means. And so we're going to start there with a definition. So let's talk a little bit about how we would define brand as it relates to B2B companies. Um, who wants to start? Actually, Gil, you want to start on that one?
Sure. I'm my background is not really building brands. It's not something I've done or cared about really too much in the past because my bread and butter was generating demand and creating pipeline, and I thought that there's no much correlation between the two, and I was wrong because I see brand as something that is vital today in building a company, especially when you create a company, and especially when you want to have constant demand for your product or service, unless you want to keep paying for demand, like historically I've been doing. And so when I think about demand, the first thing that comes to my mind is that in the past couple of months, 50% of our demand of our pipeline came organically from the website. And the reason that that is the case is because we have a brand and people know about the name metadata, and we don't have to pay them to learn who it is that, who we are and what it is that we do. And so it makes for a much easier way and much organic, natural way to learn about a company or product or a service. Um, and it also helps to build a brand because everyone is kind of on the same page when they talk about they talk about your company. They have kind of the same idea, same narrative, same story. So that's kind of how I perceive a brand.
Nice. DG,
Yeah,
what
I
about
think
you?
that's right in line with how I see things. I like to think of brand as the company's reputation, just as a simple way to put it. A brand is the company's reputation, and I think where this gets confused or mixed up in cases is that there is branding, which is the design, the logo, the website. Hey, Gil and I are starting a new, whatever startup, right? That company needs to have an identity, and that comes with colors and font and logo and all that stuff. But I think that's just one piece of it, where that all kind of rolls up to what's the company's reputation. So, for example, that is, Jason's a really nice, hardworking person. Yeah, that's on brand for him. Something he did is on brand for him, meaning that is of something Jason might do. And so I think when it comes to a B2B company, brand is really damn important because oftentimes you are selling something that is quite expensive or perceived to be. Many people are involved with it because it's a purchase from work. And so there might be multiple teams. There's procurement, contracts, compliance, security. There's 20 different things I'm sure we're going to talk about as far as the B2B buying process goes. And so um, brand matters because I want to have a reputation. This person is reputable to work with, right? I don't want to be the first person to ever go try. Maybe some people are like this, but for me, I don't want to be the first person to go try a new restaurant. I'd rather someone else tell me what the great restaurant is, and then I'm going to go there, right? And that's how that restaurant builds its brand over time. And the same is true for any type of business, whether you have the local convenience store down the street or you're selling enterprise B2B software. Your brand is your reputation.
Yeah, I like that because it's kind of how I've always thought about it. I read this once and I can't remember where, but it talked about how, or I heard somebody say it, but how your brand is really the sum of all the experiences that a customer or prospect has with your company. From the first moment they see the first ad or they first hear about you and what that first impression is, all the way to becoming a customer and what that's like, and into customer success. And it's like every single one of those experiences kind of like instills the brand in their mind. But I wanted to try and think about it a little differently because like that's an easy way to say like, oh, those things are what lead to the brand. But the brand, I was kind of thinking like it's this intersection of awareness about a company, a little bit of understanding about what they do, and then there's some like alignment to how they do it or the personality of the brand. Like I'm kind of aligned, if I'm seeing it as a solid brand, I'm kind of aligned with how they do it. And so I don't know, I just tried to think of it a little bit differently than just that sum of experiences. But
Yeah,
that's why it's hard to
there's
define.
a great thing that I read one time. It was from Seth Godin, and I can't properly attribute it because I don't know where it was. But somebody did it like an AMA with him, and they asked him, what's the biggest difference between consumer purchasing and B2B purchasing? And he said basically that when people buy things, they either want to buy the cheapest thing or they want to buy the thing that they know the best. And so when it comes to B2B buying, most of us are likely to go take a new job at a new company. And when you're at the new company, you're either trying to be frugal and save money and so buy the cheap thing, or you're going to buy the tool that you've already used before. And so like I've used HubSpot at 6 companies now. Like I'm going to go take another job and I'm probably going to buy HubSpot. Unless, he says, unless you can, so you need to you need to give them a story that they can tell their boss. Because hey Gil, you're the boss, you're the CEO, I want to go spend 100 grand on this thing. You're going to be like, why? And I'm going to either tell you, well, all the other options are $1 million, and so if that 100,000 is really cheap, right? Or I'm going to say, well, just trust me, man, I've used this in my last 7 companies, like this is the tool, right? So you have to understand that's what you're competing with. Or you have the third option, which is where brand comes in, or you give them a story that they can tell their boss and tell their company. And so this is why things like creating a category, or like at Drift, we created conversational marketing, and we gave people, even though we were a new vendor in the space, we gave people a methodology and a new way of doing things. So, hey, yeah, they may not have a ton of customers yet, but the way that these people are thinking about this is really interesting, and I want to bring it into my company because X, Y, and Z. And so they buy into the philosophy, and that all comes back to brand.
Yeah. Nice. And this, we're kind of getting into the second question a little bit, which is like, why is it important to have a strong brand in B2B? And so let's formalize that and talk about that a little bit. So you gave a couple of reasons there. I saw a stat the other day that said 82% of buyers seek out recommendations from people they know before buying, and then 50% of those people end up buying the same thing that their friends or their colleagues are using. And so I think that's another reason why having a strong brand, people are going to be talking about you. You're going to have that word of mouth. And so I think that can also help support that stat, which is people aren't going to buy things that people aren't talking about or already using. That's why it's also hard as a brand new startup to get out there, and why like getting some of that social proof and some influencer stuff going is really important in the beginning too. All of this is really kind of leading to the brand. Gil, what do you think?
I love it when you talked about when you folks talked about the methodology or giving a story to tell, or even when you talked about like the sum of all the experiences. I remember when you started working on our brand, up until today, people tell me like, yeah, you have a cool brand, like you really talk about things in a simple manner, like you're much like more, it stands out. And so when I think about like Martech specifically, right, because everything I think about really these days is the context of metadata and Martech, and so in Martech there are so many is not even a word, right? It's like 8,000, 9,000 technologies that you're competing with, and it's like all of it is smoke and mirrors, like marketers selling to marketers, marketing technologies. So it's just like a whole bunch of smoke and mirrors, very confusing language. And yes, a lot of weed involved. And so you get into this situation where it's like everyone sounds the same, you know. And if you suddenly have a brand that doesn't take itself too seriously, it's using some graphics and some language that is different than the average. You know, it has a dollar sign on the pricing page. It has content pieces of why you shouldn't be buying our product. Then you start building, I think, trust and authenticity with your audience, which they're looking for, because otherwise they don't believe the shit that you're saying.
Yeah, Dave.
I think the I think whenever we talk about brand, people always say this is marketing's job. And I agree, but I also know that you can't build a brand without the product. And I think I'm saying this, in this discussion because I think it's marketing's job to push. Marketing is a fun job to work in, but it can also be really frustrating because you often don't have the keys to all the other things that make this go. And so, if like Jason, you and I always talk about our melon hats, right? If you and I are going to go create a hat company, in order to develop the brand from a marketing standpoint, we can't do that unless we have a vision for the product. And you that means you have to be influenced by. So like if I go back to the drift example, the reason we were able to do such good marketing was because the positioning was very clear and there was such a clear customer fit and story fit, and that came from the two founders and their opinion on the market and vision. So they then come to me in marketing and say like, hey, we're going to strategically build this because we're trying to do X, Y, and Z thing. And that's where it's like, oh, okay. I think a lot of companies want to build a better brand, and they get caught up in all of the cool visual campaigns, and we're doing a new brand video, and it's like great, but that's just a one-off thing where like you could actually have none of those things, but people could say you have a brand if you really nail the positioning and messaging and story fit with your customer. And that comes from fundamentally the product that you're building. Like, Liquid Death is a great consumer example of that, right? Like nobody needed more bottles of water, but they didn't make the bottle of water and then decide how they were going to brand it. They had to that had to be the beginning of it. And then the marketing and the execution of that becomes easy. It's easy to come up with the cool looking can design when your initial philosophy is like, hey, we're going to do water in a 16-ounce can that looks like a craft beer. Okay, cool. Now we can go and create that. And so I think it's so important that the early team at the company, the founders, all of the functional execs are working on this stuff together. Maybe it's the CEO and the marketing leader who are going to break out and go and work on this like in a deeper format. But I think everybody has to be involved in the company in order
And you
for this
gave
to really be
a
successful. And I think it has to be.
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying you gave a consumer example, which is fascinating because in the consumer world, there is no differentiator. There is no fucking differentiation between RC Cola and Pepsi Cola. And I don't know, back in Israel, we had like Crystal Cola. It's like the cheap cola is like the Crystal Cola, like the three gallons that you buy. Is like there is no difference
Yeah.
between. It's almost exactly the same. But no one in B2B thinks that way, right? Especially not us. The when I say us, I mean me, like the product engineering founders. We think like everything starts and ends with
Yep.
product, which is not true, but we still think that way. And so like we'll build a differentiation of the product. We'll think the product is going to be different, the features are going to be different, the value proposition is going to be different. And the brand comes later. But if you start thinking about it from the beginning, like I wish I thought about it in the beginning, because that would have made it much easier for me to understand who am I competing with now on this same narrative? Who is trying to say the same thing that I'm competing with? Whether they build the same thing or not, it doesn't matter. I'm competing on the same mind share with this agency or with this other technology vendor. And I better have a very clear way of differentiating from them, because if I'm not, even if I build the best product in the world, I'm still going to end up in the same sales cycle with them, being kind of apples to apples comparison. So I love the fact that you gave the liquid death, because there is zero product there. They literally took water and sell it for $5 a pop. That has no reason other than the cool like mega death thing that they have going on for them.
Yeah, they do some pretty cool marketing too. Yeah, I've seen some of the stuff they've done. It's pretty interesting. And we kind of started this section talking about like why is brand important, and DG, you're talking about like the product, and you have to have a product in there as well, and that's a big part of it. And I think When I think about like why it's important, I always go back to this thing of like when times are good, you can probably get away with fairly high growth without a really solid brand. Everybody's buying stuff. There's not a lot of scrutiny. There's more money on the table, and you can probably squeak by. You can just do traditional demand gen tactics, et cetera, and get your growth. But when things tighten and they become more difficult and money tightens up, that's where I've really seen the brand help immensely. And so it's kind of like now you stick out. Now you're always on the short list. And so you're not having to scramble to even get on the short list. People know you more. So even if they don't really know you, they kind of pretend like they do because they want to feel like they know you. So you've got like the buying committee that's saying, oh, yeah, I've heard of them before. Yeah, they're pretty cool. Nice. I like that you chose them. And so it really can help when times get tight as well. And that's one of the things I think is so important about having a solid brand is you might not notice it incredibly when times are really good. I mean, you will. It'll definitely help you there, but it's really when times aren't that great where I think it really can shine.
Well, and even in a regular market where things are great, if we rewind this all the way back to the fundamentals, people can't buy from you if they don't know that you exist, right? And I think that I often talk to Pep when he was like a year or two ago when he was building Vendr, and I thought they were doing great marketing for somebody that had like no budget and just doing kind of scrappy, like just really good content that is like his videos, his LinkedIn content, his point of view and stuff. And I was like, what's your marketing strategy? And he's like, we have the product. People just need to know that we exist. And so we're doing things to raise the awareness, and we need more people to know we exist. And so like to your point earlier about like, how do you why do this? Well, it's going to be much easier if somebody knows you exist and they just can Google your name and go to your website or show up there or organically, right? Like I think about what I'm doing now with Exit 5. There's a lot of inbound, I haven't used any paid channels to grow it, mainly just because there's a steady stream of, because we already have an audience on other platforms, and some people know me through my previous work, or like the podcast has grown bigger now. They just show up on the website, and so I don't have to go and try to find them. And I think that this brand is also one of the best complements, or the best complement to outbound, any type of outbound efforts. And so like, what's the value of it to an enterprise? Well, if you can do outbound and knock on the door and somebody's heard of you, or their peers are all talking about you, then that outbound is going to be much more effective. And again, this is not, do people know your logo and your colors? It's like, I don't know, like a bunch of demand gen people that I know have been telling me about like this metadata thing. And so like, boom, then I get an outreach from one of the sales reps, and it's like, I haven't used metadata. I've never visited the website, but I've heard of you all and I know that you exist. And so I'm going to be more likely to take that conversation than the completely anonymous random company I've never heard of.
Yeah,
100%.
we saw that too at Metadata. That the sales reps would literally tell us that. Yeah, they're like, "Hey, anyone will take a call with us." So that's pretty much. It's nice. It gets a foot in the door because they're like, "Oh yeah, I've heard about you guys, or I've seen you around," and they're aligned with you as well. So it's not like they've seen you and they're just like turned off. It's like they've seen you and they're somehow aligned or they're attracted to you in some way. And so it really does help.
And sometimes they don't even know what the
I
brand
love
is,
that
but
example because it
just
also
the
helps you
recognition
diagnose
of the
like
brand.
where to focus.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I was just asked. I remember in a previous podcast, like how do you measure? How do you like measure the ROI of a brand? And I was like, you can't always measure it. Like it's very unlikely for you to be able in a B2B company measure the pipeline sourced from your brand awareness campaigns. It's gonna be very difficult. If you do, like, God bless you, that's awesome that you were able to reach that. But most can't. But you can reach some like leading indicators. Like for example, you can do a brand awareness campaign against, let's say, 100,000 folks or 20,000 folks, and do an outbound before and do an outbound after to the same crowd before they were touched by your brand and after they were touched by your brand, and the open rates and the response rate and the conversation is widely different after you're somewhere in their brain.
yeah. Cool. Well, we've got somehow only 5 minutes, about 5 minutes left. So we're going to switch and talk about like how do you get started. So let's say, um, you could either be in a brand new startup and you're creating the brand for the first time, or you're in an established business and you're trying to figure out how do we haven't really focused on brand, but now we know how important it is, so we want to get started. So how do we get started creating a brand that reflects your values and then supports demand for the company? DG, you want to start on that one?
Sure. Yeah, I don't have a preferred format for this, but I think it's something like here's who we are, here's why we exist, here's who we sell to, and here's how we're going to get customers. And I think that's like an internal type of document. It could be a written Google Doc, it could be a deck, it could be a formal presentation. But I think without a strong philosophy on like what who you are, what you do, the opportunity in the market, and like how you're going to go acquire customers, then there's no playbook to go and build a brand off of. And so and there's many variables in there, right? Like I'll use this example again. Gil and I start a company, we're bootstrapping it. And so we're not going to spend a lot on paid acquisition so therefore to go get customers, that means we're going to use our networks and we're going to do outbound. Okay, cool. That's a guardrail. That means I'm not going to go be buying fucking billboards and doing big video campaigns. That's a guardrail. You have to have that to figure out what you're going to do. Verse, we raise $50 million. We're going to go hire a team. We're going to do X, Y, and Z different things. Okay. We think that we're going to acquire people who are using Salesforce and Marketo and are mainly in the US and the UK. And here's where we're going to start. Like this is why it has to be so fundamentally tied into what the company is doing. An internal doc that explains that and has your headline, your company tagline, your about us, like in a 5 to 6 slide way. That's good enough for me as a marketer to go start to do some things to grow the awareness of this company. And then there's many different ways you would go and do that, but we would need multiple hours to talk through all those different approaches.
Yeah, I like that. And I think one of the things I was thinking of is like one of the easy ways to get started is to focus on the founder. I feel like, and so like there could be a story, there should be a story with the founder in terms of why did they start the company, what was like the interesting spark moment, and there could be like some seeds there of how to, because ultimately you want the brand to be a reflection of the CEO, at least partially a reflection of the CEO and the values. And so there's probably some story there. Like Gil had a great story that we could use. It was like he was a marketer, he was a software engineer. He saw these problems. He didn't have a solution for them, existed in the marketplace, and he went and built it. That's a great story. You can take that and like, so then people you build that trust because they're like, oh, Gil was a marketer. Okay, cool. He understands me. And then he went and built something that's for me. And so I think that can create that trust, and that trust can be part of the brand. And so I think that's an easy, I don't want to say an easy, but that could be, if you're struggling on like where to start, that could be maybe an easy way to get started.
When you're talking about the values, it almost reminds me when we were starting to like codify our culture, and we're like, how do you fucking start to do this? Like, how do you fucking codify culture and put in the values and all that shit? Especially when you work in bigger companies where it's like complete trash and like there's no correlation between the values and the reality. You're like, you don't really know how to start. And I remember with metadata, the first thing that we did, both with culture as well as with the brand, to what you just said, is that we looked at who are we, like because if, for example, like Dave, you said it's not just marketing, right? Marketing can lead, but everyone has to follow along, like the product, sales, everyone has to follow along with the brand. So, for example, in our brand, we're trying to be like transparent, right? We're trying to be honest, we're trying to be authentic, because that's who we are. If we ever meet metadata people, you'll hear swearing, you'll hear like hard feedback, you'll hear people speaking the truth and trying to like really minimize the bullshit to what's legally possible. And so, for example, when we were doing some pricing homework, and suddenly we took our pricing off for a few days. It was fucking 3 days that the pricing page didn't have a dollar sign on it. People like texted me and called me like, "Where's your pricing page? How come your pricing page is not on?" And I was like, "Fuck." It's true. Like we said, our pricing page is always going to be transparent. It's been 3 days now, or 4 days, and the pricing page hasn't been on. And it's like, it's against our values. It's against our brand. And so we better get the fucking pricing page back on with all the information on it, and it better be real. Otherwise, we're now, kind of like sabotaging our brand. Same thing with like the recent benchmark report. We gated it as an experiment to see like how is it to gate it. We have some good reasons around it, but it's kind of scary. Like now we're doing things against something that we've done in the last 2 or 3 years prior, and so you should know who you are, because if you try to also fake your brand, like if you're not an authentic person, Or if you're not like a transparent person, you're more of political. If you worked in Salesforce, for example, like you worked there for 10 years, guess what? Like you're gonna be a lot more. I don't know how to say it without swearing, but you're gonna be a lot less straightforward in your communication. And so, good luck trying to convince like a Salesforce executive to put like why you should not buy Salesforce blog post. Good luck trying to put a blog post like that, or put like the exact pricing
Nice.
dollars on the pricing page so that everyone gets a fair. Like shit, no way. You're never gonna be able to do that because that's absolutely not in their DNA. So you should be also, you should be real to who you are and try to reflect that in the brand. Otherwise, it comes out as fake too.
Well, that's a great place to wrap us up. Thanks everybody for joining. Thanks Dave. Thanks Gil for letting me moderate this thing. Hope everybody has a great rest of demand and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Jason.